started to last panel. I speak in Portuguese to presentation to three expositors. Christopher Mindment é professor de planejamento na Universidade.
Is a professor of planning at the Reading University, where he also directs the master programs in planning. He is certified and member of the Royal Town Planning Institute, and he has started his career with the municipal government, working with developments of the development policies. His research aimed at understanding the relation between the normative theories and the practical environment, both the way that theory should lead the practice and the practice should influence the development of a useful theory. Christopher has explored this connection through investigation that goes from the comprehension of the role of the civil society in the planning to the decision-making for the draining systems and the influence of the planning organizations and their institutional dispositions in practice.
And in times, the Adriana Sandri é professora.
Adriana Sandri is a professor, doctor at FAU-USP, graduated in Urbanism and Biological Sciences by USP, and also a technician. She is a researcher, coordinator of the research project entitled Mariposa, the development of innovative platforms for multifunctional landscapes with the support of PIPSAPES. She has experience in the areas of planning, urban planning, ecology of the landscape, ecosystemic services, solutions, nature-based solutions, green infrastructures with the application of algorithm and parameterization. She has acted in nature-based solutions that involve the treatment of water, containment of coasts, and improvement of microchemistry in communities and slums, in addition to recovering hydrographic basins, urban environment. Lino Sander is a professor at the Meteorology Department in the Institute of the Federal University in Rio de Janeiro, one of the coordinators of LASA Environment Satellite Applications, a specialist in remote sensing applied to quality of water.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you, Christopher.
Time is yours.
The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you everyone for having me. I am going to come out very much from an urban planning perspective. So I teach planning and I am a chartered planner myself. And I'm going to try and talk to you a little bit about how we are implementing kind of quality of life considerations into drainage decisions. So particularly thinking about sustainable drainage systems, and thinking about how we use the planning system in the UK to achieve that. So lots of points of connections with the presentations we've heard so far, but perhaps coming at it more from a policy and governance perspective. So there's a fair bit more policy in here rather than an engineering perspective. In addition to being part of the University of Reading, I'm also here as part of the BRU working group as well. And some of what I'm going to say is coming from that group. So to start off with, very much going to start by talking about some of the work we've done to try and incorporate quality of life considerations into drainage decisions. So a little bit about modelling. Then working through the kind of evolution of planning policy, particularly at national level, but some more local policy as well. And looking at how that's been incorporated into the wider policy environment for urban planning, and hopefully going to get to a couple of kind of illustrative case studies from London that show hopefully some of the potential for how we can incorporate quality of life considerations. And it really all comes back to this question. So we've heard a lot today about modelling. And obviously quantity of water managed, quality of water managed, And this is very much about how can we incorporate some of the co-benefits that we've heard a little bit about that are, to my mind, also extremely important, but perhaps are a little bit more abstract when it comes to things like modeling and equation. And throughout all of this, I think there's a kind of relationship, you see through all of this, that the relationship between policy and what is happening on the ground, I'm using the term fuzzy, perhaps the Portuguese vago is a little bit more accurate actually, in that kind of quite indirect relationship between how these elements work together. So I think you'll see that as a kind of core theme through the talk. And we start going back to the work we did with Brandia, so going way back now to 2019. But as part of the modelling work for Brandia, we were obviously developing a model that tried to pick ideal solutions for any given spatial scenario. And as part of that, we were trying to find a way to incorporate these sometimes very abstract benefits into that model. This is really interesting for me coming from a social scientific perspective. It really raises this question around to what extent does this help give these things more weight versus to what extent are we saying, oh, actually, we've used our professional judgment here, but in the model, it looks like a kind of very objective. So kind of some interesting questions around that. But we're trying to bring in things like, how do you recognize of some of the benefits we all know about? So, improved thermal comfort, safety, so possibilities for social interaction, possibilities for recreation, but also some of the more abstract things around, we know that there's a very strong relationship between green space and mental health and well-being. So how do you reflect that in a model where we're trying to bring that into what has typically been very quantifiable decisions? So we're trying to do that, and we did that by taking some kind of common examples of sustainable drainage systems and trying to work out which benefits each of those had embedded in them, and then trying to get some sort of score that you could feed into an optimization model. So that's how we did it. And I think Mariam's already mentioned that had some interesting impacts on the modeling that resulted. But this gives some sense of the kind of quality of life benefits we're thinking about. And I'm now going to kind of move away from that and think a little bit more about where some of those quality of life benefits sit in our system of urban planning in the UK. So some of you may know the UK operates quite a distinctive approach to urban planning. Compared to most places in the world, it is much more space for professional judgment. So less about specific regulation, much more about for each individual proposal, there's quite a lot of space for the planner to kind of recommend things, to negotiate and things like that. And that really drives how these kind of benefits are being embedded in new development. So there's a number of aspects to that. We are still starting with kind of policy framework. I'll talk a little bit about that, but we're feeding that through professional judgment into the actual decision making and then what gets implemented. Alongside this, we have a very strong and again quite uncomfortable driver that is the financial viability of new development. So if you look at our policy framework, developers are essentially guaranteed almost a profit margin of 15 to 20% on whatever they do. So if you think out, we want to come along, build new houses, or the planners want affordable housing, they want good quality green space, they want drainage measures, and yet all that needs to happen whilst the developer makes what is a relatively generous profit margin. So you can already see where there's space for negotiation, where some of the trade-offs might be happening. And perhaps see that through here. So that's an important context. Alongside this, our local municipalities have lost about 50% of their resourcing in 10 years. So very constrained capacity. And also very interesting, my real estate colleagues tell me that actually we're also seeing some convergence in that there's a lot more interest from the real estate industry to look at long-term place quality and the way that that's actually attractive to investors and tenants. So maybe that for us is an interesting driver to come together around this. So those things are really important drivers. Then also we have this kind of very generic policy at national scale leading to very variable local practice. I'll get into that a little bit. At the other end of the process, around the implementation and maintenance, we still have quite an incomplete regime for approval and maintenance. This is something that's really evolving. It's very interesting to think about the bureaucracy of this. And I will say a little bit more about this when we come to the end of this timeline. So in terms of incorporation of sustainable drainage into new development in the UK, we are talking about something that really dates back to about 2010. So it's relatively embedded at this point, 14 years of practice, but still quite variable. So our National Planning Policy Framework introduces the idea of SUDs as something that should be done with all major developments in 2012. In 2018, we have the idea that that should include multifunctional benefits. The wording is really important there, but there's the idea that that should come with some of those co-benefits I started talking about. We see that emerge as well through national design guidance, looking at the way that SUDs should be incorporated in green space. So I think this kind of slow movement in direction of recognizing all the possibility of SUDs. Also, it's a slow evolution becoming more complex. And then we also have alongside this a kind of legislative timeline as well. So in 2010, we have the Flood and Water Management Act, which is a response to very bad flooding in the UK in 2007. And we have one particular schedule of that legislation. This is getting really detailed, but there's an important reason for this, that addresses sustainable drainage. And the idea was that this schedule of legislation is written up with the express intention that a local body, local municipal body, as an approval body would have responsibility for approving drainage systems and then making sure they're maintained. That bit of the legislation has never been enacted, and the government had always hoped that the planning system would take care of it. And that has transpired not to be the case. There are various views saying this hasn't worked. We now need this Schedule 3 to come in. 2023, we finally had the announcement that it would be enacted, and we are currently awaiting the detail of how that's going to happen. So a year further down the line, and we still don't know the exact details, but in theory, we will complete that circle with a body that actually has responsibility for looking after this. Against the backdrop of all this, multifunctional benefits remain a kind of optional add-on at the national level. So bearing in mind that we know how important they are, there have been several new versions of this document, including another one that is coming later this year under our new government, but there is no proposed change to this part of the policy. So that's the bit of the context. I mentioned National Design Guide, we're going to flick over that. We have got some examples of local policy trying to push this a bit further. So we have places like South Downs National Park introducing sustainable construction policies. This is one example of a policy I've seen that tries to go that bit further than national level, tries to bring in actually sustainable drainage requirements for every type of development, including very small ones. So this is pushing the boundaries a bit. We have others, unfortunately, that still end up being quite vague in their policy language because there's this big thing around financial viability, and we can't get around that. We have to somehow allow developers to make their profit, and that still limits the extent to which you can really push work down with policy. So in terms of the two case studies, which I'll go through very quickly, these are both in London. One is an example of a large-scale redevelopment regeneration project on the western edge of London. The other one is very, very small-scale retrofit, and it's bringing very small measure to an existing social housing estate. So I've chosen them for their contrast. First of all, we have this. So this is around 1,500 homes, incorporates parks. It's a regeneration of an old military base. And you can see, hopefully, some of the quality of what's been incorporated here. So we have proper, vegetated swales that incorporated into the streets. But even with this, you can see that we have maintenance issues going on. So this is not uncommon, still a lot of littering around, a lot of littering being caught in here. So the maintenance is not working well necessarily. And it's worth saying the maintenance here, this is a very, very high value housing estate. So very expensive homes, and it's relying on service charges from the homeowners to contribute to that maintenance. But lots and lots of measures incorporated from the large scale swales to the kind of very small filter trench as well, and also kind of more regional scale retention basins as well. And also a kind of nod to the role of the interpretation signage here. So a little bit here around education, kind of past education, but it's actually common to both examples of putting in that this is what this is for and this is how it works. So that's the kind of the large scale case study. And this is an award winner for showing how this can be incorporated into large scale new development. But bearing in mind, it's very much reliant on kind of master planning approach. And the other thing is, this is something that's evolved over time. I picked this one out because it really shows the kind of contrast between just doing sustainable drainage and doing sustainable drainage, which actually brings those wider quality of life benefits. So that these are actually the same swale 5 years apart. On the left, you can see it's really just doing the flooding purpose, very little else, littering and everything. On the right, you can see it's kind of evolution to much more planting, again, much more attractive environment. So really linking back, hopefully, to that kind of wider benefit of mental health and well-being. What you can't quite see on this one as well, actually, is this got very small-scale rain barrels incorporated as well. So a lot going on here in terms of adding multifunctional benefits. I will skip over this one, but this is just designed to show the kind of way that development has resulted from an evolution in policy. So it's actually coming down from the London plan, which is a strategic plan. It's incorporated into the kind of policy guidance for the master plan. Then we have the developer response, and then we have the individual decisions about the proposals, which are kind of assessing the quality of the drainage systems that have been incorporated. So coming down through 4 levels of detail to get to what you see on site today. Okay, brilliant. One more case study, so good. So second case study, this one is much smaller scale interventions. This is a social housing project, much closer to central London. And you can see 1930s buildings. This is part of a kind of project to retrofit social housing with sustainable drainage systems. And the few things I think to take away from this, again, we have the interpretation signage, but also an opportunity to incorporate public art, both in some of the design, the hard infrastructure, and the design, the softer infrastructure. We have these examples of small rain gardens. This is basically a tarmac, paved area that's been taken out and replaced, high quality planting and drained into this, and also taking opportunities to incorporate things like cycle hangers and incorporating more active travel as well as part of this scheme. Another example again of the kind of the garden elements that have been incorporated. But I think what really stands out for me for this one is we talk about needing space for these systems. These are very small scale interventions that have been incorporated into existing urban space. The one that really kind of demonstrates it for me is this one in the middle, where you've literally got a corner of a road has been taken out and replaced with a small rain garden. So it shows you the kind of very small scale that can be introduced on site, along with green roofs, small scale swales and things like that. So a lot of small scale interventions. I think in total, this was a relatively low cost capital project, but it perhaps goes to show what can be achieved. And in terms of just overall implications, just to close with, obviously working down through the different scales and using those to persuade developers about what's needed, and hopefully our contribution to same place quality, but not that same force of regulation that perhaps you have an opportunity to work with in Brazil. Giving planners those tools to negotiate, but versus actually a lack of capacity and expertise in the system, which is a big problem for us. And real huge possibilities of large scale redevelopments. No excuse why that shouldn't be there for those. But I think also remembering that those small scale retrofits can actually make a huge changed people's day-to-day lives as well. And that's kind of reflecting the feedback for that second project. And that's where I'll stop. So thank you very much. Okay, so just affordable housing for low income. Yeah. So social housing, affordable housing for low income. Yeah. That's good point. Yeah.
Já. Tenho mania de falar andando, então às vezes eu tô aqui, me avise.
Sometimes I'm here and I have to speak and walk. So tell me if I'm not using the mic. Thanks for the invitation, and I hope I can contribute with something. I was thinking about what I could talk about if it was about the drainage book, but I think it would be more interesting to bring a new concept that we have been studying, which is the landscape information modeling. It is part of a study that is Água Java. I think Risi, who is here, the leader of the company, together with FAU, USP, CAPES, and FAPESP. So how am I going to present this, a little bit of the concept of what this is, and then some examples for the application of the platform. So this proposal of landscape information modeling, for the ones who are architects, they know the acronym BIM, that is to automatize the information of the project. So before building this room, for example, this line is a wall, the wall has certain thickness, the material, and you can see the room, automatize it. We see many students using CAD, but it gives me certain of, because CAD uses that, we have many architects and engineers, but it uses the same system as a drawing. We draw a line there and you go there and write line and the size of the line. And now the BIM systems, they automatize this process. And what is LIM? It's the idea of automatizing the production process for designing, for drawing the landscape. So creating a platform that can say that this tree has certain attributes and size, and then you start structuring all this. This already exists. There are some systems that can do this kind of calculations and software. And our idea is, from the proposal of this link to work, the similarities of BIM, is to create a specific platforms for green structures projects. I'm going to skip this because of the time. And to focus more with you on one of the topics that was this platform based on the LIM platform, and it structures a language to think how we can think the process for green infrastructure process, which is automatized. So I'm going to show how it works. Just to show a little bit of the team, I'm going to show 5 premises of the platform, and from the explanation about this, I'm going to tell you how it works. So the first premise is that it is based on the initial project phase. So the idea is to help decision makers, the architects, engineers, biologists, to enter this database and start planning where the best solutions would be for certain, like stormwater gardens, something that would be customized. So like I said before, the idea is to use this parametry. We see many parametric projects based, for example, on those benches that you did, something that you can inform the system. Look, grasshopper, I want this bench, and then the system calculates for you and automatizes the best solutions. So if you base that, the most common base we have for parametry and automatized solutions would be ChatGPT, for example. ChatGPT is now getting older when it comes to landscapes. I don't know if you ever tried ChatGPT, like draw a rain garden for me. The bad things that we have as a result. I should have showed you some of the tests. The idea is to automatize these information parameters for the city, for the system, so they have better responses for this. So the logic is to feed it in the system, as it is artificial intelligence, a series of parameters. The parameters that you who work with this, you know, so hydraulic parameters, I think this is key, crucial point we saw in the last presentations. This is difficult data to have. São Paulo have many, these are the data that we had of water volume, the water and social parameters, the runoff of water, how much you want to spend and how. For example, if you're dealing with the rain gardens, what is the thickness of it? So you can include all the parameters that you want as the entry data, and it will generate a project with the best solutions. And then the design elements, we can include all the elements we think are interesting and can be parameterized from the reservoirs, everything you imagine, you can automatize and include it in the system to be modeled. And then from this system, I'm going to consider this as an example. For example, these hydraulic stairs, which is a creation of Riciane with Água Java, that is the idea of using this element in the system and I tell the system, look, this brings this like an air surface, of course, it is located in a space. You cannot compare Northeastern with São Paulo. You have to see the right location. The carbon location, so the system can draw the best system for vegetal stairs. I want the surface temperature to be this, that it would kidnap this amount of carbon per year. So it will give you the best design and the better location in the system.
Só voltando aqui a tabela, dá para automatizar tendo equações.
We can automatize having equations. Once you create an algorithm of any situation, from thermic comfort, hydric situations, thermic, you can parameterize this system. So I'm going to go through here for you to see how it works. Just a parenthesis, I put this here because of the panel. The idea of the platform, the Mariposa platform is you're not, it's not mandatory for you to know how to work with this, it's just part of it. And obviously, the City Hall won't have this video is very complex and the algorithm and language of programming to see how to work with this. So the logic of the platform is that anyone that knows how to click a button understands how to parameterize this, understanding what is ChatGPT and all of this. You need to know which is the algorithm that is has within. So this is a premise that the platform has and is accessible online for everyone. Let me show the templates we have and how to work with them. So the logic is we have a situation, existent situation, you parameterize, you have, and you have to create how many you want. I'm going to check here some functions. I want this one. So what is this example? You have the criteria for performance, and you add the data that you have, accessible data that you can add within the platform in geoprocessing. You name these maps and they're going to generate scenarios for you. So I used an algorithm I can share with you if you want, have interest in how it works. And I can get this. We added type of soil, visibility, the topography elements built. This is a draining water system, and what the system does is we add this data, which are the minimum necessary to calculate any situation any device of green areas, and we can I can have weigh this, and this map is much more important than this other one. So where are these? We have some flooding areas and how we work this in these areas on the basins. And so the system is very interesting and generates how we can work with the devices. And then a bit of the algorithm that is detailed and the layers, and it automatizes the system and work. For example, rain moments, and I add as a criteria if I have the system, and it automatizes in the map for me to see the best places on rainy days or anything that I can imagine. You can see here, this is automatized of the part of the algorithm. You can click or not and check what map you want, which one is more priority. This is an interesting way to have any city hall. We can have this geolocation, and we have some base maps to localize in the system. Once you automatize this and you localize the device, you advance in the project and gets into the scale of the planning. So in this scale, I'm going to show you the example that we have. Just show this is the algorithm behind this, and you have the draining of the water and the part of the video and how we work. If you want to automatize where you want how you want the topography, and it calculates where to add the parts and everything, this automatization of the system. And this, for example, and this is important to do a lagoon and automatize which is the best, following the parameters that we want with the template. And also you can say which are the best trees, what type of tree do you want, and distribution localization, but we certainly won't show to the city hall once they don't have this. And the idea is for us to be able to translate this in a language or Netflix, ChatGPT, for people to work with this.
Mostrar os exemplos dos reservatórios e dos modelos em 3D que a gente fez. E aí, de reservatório,
and for reservoir
and
planning is with the secondary one, the character of the project part. I'm going to show two projects that I did. One is a reservoir here that you have in water and Salacura. And it is located
inunda muito, não exatamente onde está o reservatório, mas ajusante aonde inunda o beco do Batman.
Upstream is where we have this. If we have any rain, this is, if you know the region of Vila Madalena, you know, and this reservoir and to contain these waters. This is planned for a long time. What is not built yet, because the population doesn't, we don't have floodings in their houses. Why do I want a reservoir next to mine, next to my swimming pool? Because for people who are upstream is the problem, and reservoirs, we put them upstream, it's not downstream. So they invited.
Eles são necessários. Só que vamos pensar para além de uma
and we're
caixa de
going to
concreto
think
fechada,
beyond a
festa, né?
box
E aí a gente pensou
of
o que a
concrete
gente poderia
box,
fazer
and what
com
we
essa caixa
thought
de
was
concreto.
how,
A primeira
what can
coisa
we
foi,
do with this
obviamente, abrir
concrete
o córrego. Então, a gente
box and to
convenceu eles
open
de que
the
o
river,
piscine
and
não
we convinced
precisava ter
them
20
that
metros
the
de profundidade,
swimming pool
poderia ter
didn't need
5. E aí a
any
gente
depth
abre o
for
córrego e pensou
10
todo
meters. It was able to
tratamento
have
das margens
uh,
para limpar
5,
essa água, uma vez que a gente sabe que,
and
embora
once
ficar na nascente, ela é
we,
suja,
if
né?
we're
E
in
aí
the
também partes para
beginning of the
oxigenar a
river, we
água
have
e
parts to
voltar ela
oxygenate
canalizada na
and take it
água.
back,
E
canalized
aí,
in
nesse
the
trecho, o que a
area.
gente pensou,
So
né?
from
Lembra
this,
que a
what
gente
we
comentou?
thought
Quem vai querer entrar num
was
buraco
who
de
wants to
concreto de
go
5 metros?
to get
Você
there
precisa colocar
to
alguma
this
coisa lá
5
para as pessoas
meters
quererem descer.
thing.
Então, a gente pensou em uma série de possíveis atividades para
And
as pessoas quererem usufruir desse local. Então, atividades ao livre, forma de andar, piscina,
how we work,
diferentes fatores para a
swimming
pessoa
pools,
conseguir sair
lakes,
daqui
a
da
lot of
rua,
factors for
descer
people
5
to
metros e
leave
se
the street
interessar
in
por
these
isso.
5 meters and
Além
get
disso, a
interested
gente
about
também
that.
aplicou a plataforma
And
Mariposa para calcular qual era a melhor seção do córrego, tanto em termos
and
de
which is the best
diminuição da
section
vazão,
of the
para tratar
river
as águas em
on
período de
diminishing
seca,
of
e
the
aumento da vazão para conter
streaming
essas águas
and
em período de chuva.
increasing of
Então,
this
ela também entra aí
in the
na
periods
plataforma
of
Mariposa e automatização desses
and
eventos. Então, eles
automatization
não
of
são
these
aleatórios.
moments.
E aí, só para mostrar para vocês, calma aí que
And just to show you
isso
here,
seria a imagem do meu
this is
também,
the
depois vocês agora eu vi.
image.
Esse
I don't
seria,
know,
só para
this
repor de
is
volta,
the
tô
image
mostrando a
just for
imagem
you
de como
to
ele
show.
funcionaria em
This
período
is
de
the
seca
images on how
calor.
it would work.
Eu acho que é porque é alta resolução, né?
I
Mas
think that
essa
is because
seria
it's
como
high
funcionaria em
resolution.
período
This
de
is
seca
how it
e
would
o
work in
próximo como
a shorter
funcionaria em período de cheia. Então,
areas,
como que a gente
periods
automatiza
and
aí o
flooding
sistema.
periods. This is
Eu
what we automatize
deixei
in
com
the
esse vídeo,
system.
mas eu queria
I
mostrar
got
mais
I
coisas
had
para
this
vocês.
video, but I
Teve
wanted to
uma
share another
entrevista para
video,
se interessar para ver o
but I'm going to
funcionamento
share
de
the other
preservação.
one.
Aí, por fim, o último,
And
deixa eu passar o último, que ele vai na linha
let's
do
show the
localizado,
other
que
one
é
that we
o
go
modelo
through, the
3D. Então,
localized, that is
o
the
sistema, ele
3D
automatiza,
model,
você
the
coloca, por
system
exemplo, um jardim de chuva e
automatized.
você consegue
We
mudar o
are
tamanho
the
da
rain
pedra, quantidade
garden,
de
and we
vegetação.
can
Então, você
change
coloca, eu
the
quero
size
tantos
of the
arbustos, ele
stone.
te dá quanto de
We
carbono. Aí
want
você
this
fala,
kind
quanto
of
de
this
carbono, ele
amount
te dá
of,
arbusto.
and
Ele
you
pode, você pode
want
tanto entrar com
you can
caráter de
add through
desempenho,
the
quanto
how many
entrar com
CO2 you want to
caráter de
avoid,
quantidade de
and you
plantas,
can
vegetação.
go
Esse
through
é um exemplo,
performance and
por
amount
exemplo,
of
de um jardim
plants
de
that you
chuva.
want.
Você
This is
coloca
an
o tamanho
example
dele, ele te dá
of a
características, ele
garden.
acumula,
They can
obviamente, olhando as
tell
características
you the
iniciais,
amount
ele te
of
dá quanto
milliliters
dessas plantas retêm de
and how many
carbono,
of
você
these
pode
plants that you
fazer,
have
que
carbon
tipo de
you
dispositivo
can
você
use,
quer,
what
né?
kind of
E aí, a
device you want to
partir
use.
disso, a
And
gente
from
propôs
there, we
uma área de
proposed
filtração,
a
que é um
filtration
sistema
area that is a
descentralizado
system
de retenção das águas.
decentralized
Esse daqui está em licitação.
rotation of the
Se der tudo
waters.
certo, a gente acha que vai dar tudo certo,
I believe it's going to
mas
work,
a gente acredita que a gestão atual vai
but we
implantar,
believe
né,
that the
como
present
super
management
positivo.
are going to
Ele está
take
em
care of
licitação
it
agora,
and
está
is
atualmente sendo
going
feito o
through a
projeto
bid now.
executivo dele.
And we go
Então,
doing
imagino
the
que seja
executive
implantado nos
project,
próximos
and I believe
anos.
it's going to be
A
implemented
lógica
within the
dele
next
fazer
years.
um sistema
Its logic
descentralizado
is to
de
do a
infiltração na várzea do
decentralized
Anhangabaú. Aqui
system.
está o MASP, é onde é o projeto.
Here is MASP, where the
Porque a
project
gente queria
is,
provar que é possível
because we
reter
wanted
água
to
sem
prove that it's
colocar
possible to
piscinão.
retain water without
Eu,
having a swimming
então,
pool.
ou seja, a
Okay,
gente precisa de
so
algum
we
reservatório na bacia
need
para conter a quantidade de
some
volume de
reservoir
água.
in the
Porque a
bay
bacia do
to
Anhangabaú, ela é
contain the
extremamente
volume of water
impermeabilizável.
because it's
Então, por
very
mais que a gente consiga, a gente
impermeabilized.
colocou o
So
reservatório que eu falei
even
dos
if we
25
had,
avessos de infiltração,
we added the
ainda assim é
reservoir, we
necessário
have
algum
the
tipo de reservatório,
infiltration,
mas
we need
obviamente ele
some
tinha que ser
reservoir
nessa
there,
caixa de
and
concreto.
basically would need
E
to
aí, só
have
para
a
mostrar
concrete
para vocês e
area.
concluir,
So
eu
just to
quero mostrar
show
um
you,
videozinho que ele explica
and
bem a
I'm going
lógica
to
do
show you a
sistema
video that shows the
descentralizado,
logic of the system,
como foi pensado o
how it was
modelo, né?
thought the
Só para
template.
explicar para vocês. Então,
Just to
uma vez que
explain,
começa uma chuva de
once we have
cabeceira
a
lá na
rain
MASP, as águas se
there in
encaminham, né,
MASP,
pela
the
avenida,
waters
e aí elas começam a se
go
direcionar
through
para
the
alguns
avenue
jardins de chuva
and
colocados
goes to
aqui
some
e se encaminhar
gardens
para a
and
biovalorização
go
nas
to the
laterais da
bio
Mãe do Vale. Uma vez que você
areas
encaminha
on
para
the
as
valley.
biovalênicas,
Once
você
the water go there, you can go through two ways, two paths. One beyond the street, and if the infiltration pond cannot are not able to take care of the water, we can send them to some gardens and hydraulic areas that are with vegetables and some filtration systems that are located on the margin of the street. And here, these two systems, we do them because it's the end of a valley. We have low infiltration and we need to add this. So it works as a way that is decentralized, thinking about we have the beginning of the river until the end of the thinking about and rain terraces and going to the reservoirs that goes under 9 de Julho Street. And from all this material that we launched here since 2018, we did these 3 catalogs that are going to be launched within the next weeks. This is a catalog that is with green infrastructure for free spaces and shows all the devices that can be used, how to implement or not implement, and has a database for city halls and decision makers to choose the best option related to draining. We weren't able to take care of all the devices. That's it, and thank you for your attention, and I'm here for your doubts if you have them.
Okay. So, following my previous colleagues, I will be giving this talk in Portuguese. Is that all right for everyone? Do you have the translation? Everybody has the translation on? Okay. So, okay. Então, eu sou Lino Sander.
I'm Lino.
Eu sou professor do Departamento de
A professor of the Meteorology Department in Rio de Janeiro University, and I work in the app for environmental satellites. The lab has some fronts and is related to the quality of the water, but Professor Renata is going to be here as well.
Desculpa, pessoal, tecnologia. A professora Renata Libonati também estará aqui nos próximos dias, então acho que é interessante.
So it is interesting if some of you has the curiosity to know what the lab has been doing. With the work I've been doing, we wanted to say that it's interesting to bring not that this scientific description that is focused on this science, but what we would like to put on the table to understand what is technology. I'm going to bring some situations with the development of the tools that we're going to bring.
Bom, então os objetivos de desenvolvimento sustentável, né, não é novidade para ninguém, eles condensam uma série
the SDGs condense several initiatives for the impact by being a physic and working for 15 years with different groups. We have a huge opportunity to work with multidisciplinarity, and particularly for this, we have the sustainable development. For those who work with this, it's very curious on how we have a synergy, but it's very interesting because it's scarce, but it's not an ocean, only an ocean. It's in lakes and lagoons, and we have several discussions, and it's interesting that every one of these moments are approached by engineers, environmental engineers, a lot of oceanographers, and even physics. And the focus here is more the urban areas. I think it's very interesting.
Então, muito vai se discutir aí até
So we're
2030
going
em
to
relação a
discuss a lot up to 2030 about healthier, productive,
enfim. E as ferramentas de sensoriamento remoto
and the
tentam dar um pouco mais de
tools
informação sobre isso.
can have a bit more information about that, but it is important for us to discuss the particularities that we have related to urban areas. But I like this image a lot, that's showing that climate change for lakes, it's a box in a huge amount of processes that is differentiated. We have some species that has a lot of, we have a structure that is differentiated, and obviously we have a high level of the, in most part of these lakes. This is something that I think is interesting as well, that's showing that more in the sense of nutrients in this area, they get in these bodies and how they operate with this system. Of course, it doesn't happen only in urban lakes, but also in cities that are on the coast, with a significant alteration of the quality of the water in these regions. And we have a word here that is hubs. I'm sorry if I'm repetitive for some, but I thought it was interesting to bring this contextualization and these hubs, how they can be impact directly the health of people, what is related to quality of life, among other things. Another thing, I know it's in Portuguese, there are not all news on the newspaper that talk, particularly in Rio de Janeiro, but it's not that this is not on the media, it's not because of the quality of the water in the coastline.
Cobra, entre aspas, não é que não se saiba disso, né? Mas até aí, passar disso para a gente ter
to go through this, to have an alert system, a capacity, monitoring capacity to get to a solution based on nature that can mitigate these impacts, we have to work a lot. So what we do, we monitor this.
E como que a gente faz esse monitoramento? Bom, para a qualidade da água, vou chamar de tradicional aqui, não briguem comigo, né? O que que a gente faz? A gente coleta amostras em campo, né? A gente leva para o laboratório.
And we show the samples, we do the analysis.
Então, pensando numa temporalidade.
And we're thinking about a drive of time that is larger, showing the samples in the field. It demands an effort that is reasonable in time and money. This came from some of the tables yesterday. And we have the alternative of systems that are anchored, that are treated constantly. What is the difficulty we have in this type of approach that is indispensable and totally necessary? But while the samples don't have the high resolution, even if we don't have the samples all the time, but we're able to add these samples in different parts of the lake. In this case, we have the information.
Diversas questões, eles me dão uma informação de um ponto só, né? E é aí que trabalhar com sensoriamento remoto começa a ser interessante. Eu trouxe aqui para vocês terem uma ideia, né? Esse aqui é um monitoramento que tem sido feito na Lagoa Rodrigo de Freitas. Esse monitoramento, infelizmente, por questões que a Daniela mostrou claramente, né, no Rio Grande do Sul, mas
in Rio Grande do Sul was interrupted, and we had 6 moments of the quality of the water, and weekly or quarterly, to see the effort that we need for this. This is another system, the Circosta, of data collection.
Em que você consegue não coletar, perdão, você consegue, a partir de equipamentos que são ancorados, né? Você consegue ter
And they're anchored
altíssima
resolutions, high resolutions.
Qual que é o problema, né? Em regiões urbanas, esses sensores acabam não respondendo como a gente gostaria. Então a gente aqui tem 2 gráficos, né? Um da
And here we
turbidez
have
e da
2 graphs on the turbidity and the concentration of
de
chlorophyll,
altíssima
and
turbidez aqui
then
nada mais são do que bioincrustação.
nothing more than
Esses
biocrustration.
sensores acabam tendo
This
problemas
sensor, and
dar a
this is a
informação detalhada.
problem, giving the information that is detailed. So here we work with remote sensoring, and because my goal is not to talk about this,
Essencialmente, você relaciona dados de qualidade da água, né? Dados que eu
data
chamo
of the
de
quality of the water on inside with the satellite image and what we call the underwater light fields, and we have to work on the fields, develop algorithms to understand the color of the water, and from there we get to concentrations for these parameters. Because I'm from Belo Horizonte, this Lake of Pampulha
sofre com problema, né, de poluição
we
muito
have
forte.
problems with contamination, pollution. And here is just example on how the information of the color of the water translates
de concentração de clorofila, que é parâmetro para proxy de algas, florações de algas, né? E pode ser utilizado para
and can be
monitoramento
used for monitoring
determinação de políticas públicas para
and determination of public policies.
Para isso, a gente tem
For
em relação a
this,
essa
we have
plataforma
not
que
only
nós
this platform that I'm going to show in Brazil, there's not a lot, but they exist. We develop platforms
de qualidade da água, tá?
of quality of the water. This is the initiative that we've been doing in the lab with the platforms located in this area that are going to show this side and the hill, and specifically for the state of Rio de Janeiro with financing of ATER. So here you can have a situation of this, the city. In this case specifically, I have what I call Bloom's frequency. This in 5 years of data that I have where the exploration happens. So we have information like this one, concentration of chlorophyll, turbidity, and the parameter. Urban lakes. And we have people from everywhere, and the definition of what is the urban area. And looking for this, we can discuss this element. I try to do accounting on how many urban lakes we have, and I have a definition that maybe we can every forum I go, I ask. So this is just to show some examples that I have in the Freitas Lagoon and everything. And it can be done in several regions, but this is Brazil as a whole. This is the other platform we have, goes for a more coastal area. We have bays here that are very impacted. Bahia de Guanabara is a whole plate for this kind in terms of impact. This is a type of product that we have here. I just added here for you to see how variable it is. This is a turbidity for one date and the other. the tides also work on this. And here to show you the difference that we have among sensors. I have a high resolution, space resolution, that is a bit lower. And I have an image here every day, every 5 days, to discuss a bit of that. And here we have the quality. It's worthless having this if we don't talk about quality of data. So once we go forward with this, we have an amount of sensors. Part of them are free. We don't, because sensors, they have high resolution. There's a bit expensive. So it makes difficult the strategy, but I wanted to bring something that I showed less, but this is the strategy showing this idea for us to get more data to validate the quality of what we are going to do with remote processing. And here, this is a joke, but the cell phone is a possibility. This is just an example of something we used, an app called hydrocolor, that we can have a picture of the water and translate that in a parameter of quality. And we have this here, and I don't have my 5 minutes, and my 5 minutes are up. So we wanted to work this. This is Gabriela. She's a doctor. She believes clouds are better than water, and we work with a community of fishermen here in the lagoon. And this, it's very complicated to do, but because of several aspects, the capability of creation of a network of collaboration to show how to add, to collect data. And other thing that I brought the professors, the university professors, is I still believe that university extension is still a cooperation, very important cooperation situation, and 10% of our time, it needs to be extension. This is an incentive as well. And we still have this because of having this, there's more and more people able to create this network, and helps a lot. So what do I have here? What I call what's next? Community is going to improve the quality of data, is going to improve the algorithm for you to get to parameters of quality of the water for differentiation. And this is something that is going to happen. We're going to be able to increase the amount of data. We're going to have better amount of for optical data. We're going to create collaboration networks to have more data. But I believe that there's something that Climapolis is a great place for us to improve this, which is to
have this relationship with the decision makers. So I have had a bigger and bigger contact with the City Hall in Rio, with the Environmental Institute, to try and implement this platform so it can be made available. Rio has an operation center that makes lots of data available. We would like this to be something that could be made available for others. People who work with remote sensing, they have to understand what the issues are, population, government, for example, the fishing communities of Lagoa de Freitas. We have to understand what are the tensions there among the decision makers and the environmental agencies to try to improve the quality. And we would like this information that we produce and be a little bit more related to quality life, not only as an alert system. It would be interesting, for example, information about quality of life could be in that model. The more information we have, the more variability, because this is something that happens recurrently, so we need to have this environmental data. It would be interesting for us to have something more connected to what I call quality of life. So that's it. With that, I conclude my presentation.
For the
all the presentations. My name is Renata Priori. I will coordinate the debates. I would like to invite you, the three presenters, for joining the table for discussion. Eu vou me desculpar com a plateia um pouco, porque
Sorry for the audience, and we have very short time.
Da presença dos tradutores.
The presence of the interpreters.
Então,
So
abrir para o debate, claro.
the idea is to open it for debate, of course, and try to have a discussion, but I will try for the comments to be brief, objective questions, so we can try and close at 8. Okay, thank you. The idea is to have a round of questions and then some questions and comments. I think around 4 questions would be enough.
Muito bom. 1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4. We have the 4 questions already. Renato, if you want to start, and then the two of you. Okay, 5 questions. Okay.
Please.
Very briefly, one question is, we are always saying about the problem of maintenance of NBS. So define the level of maintenance that we expected, because if I go to the cities, you see a bush, huge amount of kind of a jungle, urban jungle. And what are we expecting of NBS when it's implemented and grow? And how could we evaluate the capacity of self-regeneration of these plants, or either in cases of erosions? That is, to me, to be the most important aspect. So that's it. The others, I really love the Mariposa system. It's really interesting. I want to know it better. And Lino, we are working with trying to merge satellites with systems, low-cost systems for monitoring and checking heat, urban heat production. So this is something that we should develop. Thank you very much.
Obrigada. Em primeiro lugar, parabéns. Acho que as 3 apresentações foram muito interessantes.
First of all,
Mas a minha pergunta
congratulations. The presentations were very good. My question is to Adriana. I would like to confirm if I understood well, because my background is not modeling, but you took the results of the books, the drainage books, from São Paulo. So you had, for example, you knew what the volume would be for the basin and sub-basin, and then you simulated different possibilities, for example, of having storage to store that in not just one place. It could be a distributed storage. Is that so? Okay, so now my question is, the first, if there is the possibility, some kind of connection with a simulation model that is used to generate this book, and if this model can automatize this analysis and bring these possibilities directly, so it was not, another job for us to do. And the other thing is, when it comes that actually, and obviously this will depend on the size, the format, the topology of the basing, the sub-basing, and the discussion, but the hydraulic impact of a reservoir in certain places is not the same of a same volume in different locations, right? So if this is also measured, because this will have an impact in micro drainage. And the last question is if it is dummy proof. So if I am simulating, for example, the infiltration, the rooftop, for example, but I decide that I will have a vegetation, I think it's beautiful, and I will include any kind of vegetation there. And it will tell me, look, this vegetation is not appropriate for the kind of weather
have in São Paulo, for example. Or the user must have some kind of knowledge, but I think it was fantastic, you know, your presentation was fantastic, thank you.
Obrigada. Foram ótimas as falas e você bem
Thank
breve também.
you, all the presentations were nice. Adriana, very punctual question. I would like to know how this calculation of carbon capture works, considering the time plants take to grow. You know, the different stages of the plant and different landscapes, and how do data that must be fed them to do the modeling, if it is related to the question I'm going to ask Ian, because we have a deficiency of historical data. And when we have this, it's important to have this overview, not only to adapt it, correct? The landscape, but also to see, to have a prediction of what may happen, what is likely to happen, because we have possible scenarios of climate change and impact. So I would like to know in that sense, the work you are doing, if there is a project like a data repository, what is the data collection, satellite image, quality of life, biota, plants, proliferations, if you have something in that sense.
All the three presentations are excellent, and thank you very much. Regarding water quality parameters, what are the parameters that we can monitor through the satellites or above the water surface optical sensors? I mean, occurrence of algal blooms or any other parameters or turbidity, what kind of parameters that we can monitor that?
Então, na agricultura de precisão, já se trabalha com
precision agriculture. We work like for soy in certain extension, agriculture, something that has to be harvested. So it's not novelty working with that, the satellite using the color. But as you showed, the urban lagoons here in the metropolitan region of São Paulo, there are three big reservoirs, Guarapianga, Bines, and I forgot the name of the other. But these are the three main ones, Cantarém. So I work Guarapiranga, so I would like to ask you if your work reaches, for example, which stream brings certain kind of pollution, for example, analyzing its color, because then we can have some work for that specific stream, because Guarapiranga, I don't know if it still has, there were two streams that would pollute half of the Guabirituba that was really in the urban area, and if it's possible to try to do this kind of work for these three reservoirs, it would be good. Also for Sabesp, it's going to be sold, but it would be interesting for them to know where pollution comes from.
Thank you very much. Very interesting talk. Chris, I don't have a question for you. We can take it offline. Adriana, very interesting work. I have one question, but I'll take that offline with you to get better to understand the concept, but that was very interesting. Thank you. Lino, I'm glad that we are finishing the talk with your session on water quality, because we discussed a lot around quantity, but less quality is such a pressing issue. Two questions I have you considered, or are you thinking of considering pollutants such as heavy metals and also microplastics, which are two important factors? I'm not a chemist, but there are interactions between different considering to expand and reflect on those types of pollutants. And I'm working on a bit myself at the moment, and we're looking into, for example, microplastics and exploring how nature-based solutions can tackle issues such as microplastic removal. We've done a benchmark on that. That's first question. Second question, in 2017, I completed a project with CETESB. We looked at water quality data they collected in their reports, and they have something like water quality index. I don't know if you're familiar with that. What's your view on those indexes that could be incorporated in this type of a study at the analysis stage?
Thank you all for the questions. We can follow the sequence of the presentations for the answers. Thank you.
Thank you. So on maintenance, so Mariam will give you an engineering answer. From a planning perspective, the thing is it's bound up in legal agreements. And so a lot of the large scale housing developments, it's being funded through service charges on the owners. And so I think that's making it expensive, but I think there's also something about the quality of the projects. So there's a third one in my slides, which I didn't talk about, which is the new around the American Embassy in London. And that's incredibly high quality. It's beautiful. It will cost an absolute fortune to keep it in the same state it's in. St. Andrews probably falls somewhere in the middle. There's a level of robustness there that if you don't, prune the plants, keep it in the same way, it will keep its quality to a certain extent. But they're already seeing issues, blocking up some of the filters, things like that. And I think actually one of the things that stood out to me about that third example around social housing is there is a robustness to what's been done there. The materials are robust, the planting is very robust. So although the litter is perhaps a problem in terms of the exact operation, there's perhaps a lower level of maintenance required to keep the same quality of life benefits. And it's very interesting because Josh and I were talking about this earlier. It does seem we've caught ourselves up to, the maintenance costs are particularly the unknown in the UK, and that's perhaps a lot of where the nervousness around sustainable drainage systems comes from. Actually, it's that long-term unknown, whereas perhaps in other contexts, those costs are perhaps lower because of things like lower labour costs and so on. So I'm afraid not a direct answer, but something around that. Yeah, thank you.
Obrigada pelas questões, eu anotei algumas aqui na...
Thank you for the questions. I took some notes. When you talk about the integration, data integration, this is what we are facing on the platform, because the grasshopper is an algorithm based on Ryan, so it is like CAD that you can maybe inform it. Instead of drawing the line, you say draw the line and it draws. So it is good because it has the interoperability of the system, so it can take several layers of other softwares and use it to feed them. So the drainage books, for example, the years we work there, they use Pesquisa, which is an analysis software for data analysis and hydraulic modeling. So I don't need to do the hydraulic modeling. I can take the outcomes from it and inform the algorithm. I think it's very good. We can talk about it. And we can use the quality data analysis, and we don't need, we need an equation that is able to systematize the drawing. So if I can tell the system, look, the quality of water is this, I want to reach that, and inform the system what are the better devices, they can automatize it in any of the lagoons. So you can create different algorithms to do so. And answering your question about carbon is the same logic. But the problem is that carbonic, we have allometric equations. These are equations that you remove part of the tree, see how much carbon it can remove when it grows. But this we have just for certain kinds of trees. You don't have this for bushes, for example. So if you are going to use the bush, I don't have the information about carbon, we can use approximations now. So I can apply this only if I can systematize, for example, how much it will remove, how much carbon it will be removed. So if we have all the equations, it's possible to model everything. And then to answer your question about damage is really difficult to measure because it's difficult to have a mathematical equation on damage. So what could be done is to maybe put some species into the system and say, these species are not appropriate for roofs, for example. So we come with this kind of species and say no. But we would need a robust database for that. So what would be ideal is to maybe have artificial intelligence that can search the internet for certain platforms to feed Mariposa. And then And this is what we are trying to do, how we can maybe inform the platform, for example, take papers that study plans that would cause any damage to the roof, for example, and apply to it. So as it is a platform that anyone can operate, you don't need previous knowledge about vegetation, for example, otherwise it wouldn't be so functional. And then when it comes to the book use the logic first, you do blueprint, then you draw. The last books we started analyzing how we could and do it more automated way. And centralize and decentralize. Acclimation book was the first where they the decentralized solutions, calculated solutions. So I suggest you to take a look on it because it compares the different solutions, because the others still insist on centralized solutions as a solution. They cannot see much the private locations, which is a problem. Exactly. Between.
Do you have translation? You don't, but I can do it in English if it's okay. Okay. So Renato's not here anymore, so I wanted just to talk. Rita's here. That would be great if they get together and talk to Professor Leonardo Perez, because they have been working with the detection of urban heat island. We talked about that yesterday, and actually there's a project that we are developing in the lab now that is focusing on the impact of the water temperature on decreasing or not the urban heat island. There are a bunch of solutions that they actually this is a question that I wanted to ask yesterday. There are a bunch of solutions, nature-based solutions that they're trying to include some sources in the cities to decrease temperature. I don't know if that's something that the scientific community has set on that yet, but there are a bunch of places where you have lagoons, and I don't know if the increasing the temperature of the lagoon decrease the urban heat island or not. So that's something we don't know about that yet. Yeah, so that would be great to talk about it in the Climapolis. So there was a question there. So the state of Rio de Janeiro has a very large data set on quality. The problem is that it's each 3 months and in different parts of the state. The Rio de Janeiro mayor, is that how to say it in English? Yeah, okay, so there's more data, but the problem is that there's not continuity on that, so that's hard. But I mean, depending, and that tackles on your last question, which is if you're looking at turbidity, and you have like the Landsat series, which goes to 85, you can be pretty the occurrence of higher and lower turbidity. And that's something that you can do. You can monitor the plume of a river if you're looking at which river is actually changing the water quality in some places. In the São Paulo state, there's a group in INPE that's working on very good algorithms to retrieve water quality. So they have been doing in Billings and Cantareira, and what is the other one? Sorry? Guarapira. Sorry, yeah. So yeah, so for turbidity, we are actually okay. The occurrence. But the problem is that the amount of. So when you have to set your algorithm to give the amount of, that start to be a problem. It's actually in the literature, I mean, in the scientific community right now, what we have been doing is actually looking in uncertainties. And so for your last question, turbidity and chlorophyll occurs and the amount of, we can get it pretty okay. The problem is like phytoplankton types. Phytoplankton types is important because harmful algal blooms, they depend on the phytoplankton types. And we don't have data, the amount of data to achieve that. And we don't have the spectral resolution for the sensors. Okay, so now there's this new thing about the hyperspectral sensors and orbital sensors, right? So now we will have better achievement or less uncertainty on turbidity, the concentration of suspended materials, organic and inorganic, and probably the dissolved organic matter. Much better than for the multispectral sensors. But the problem then is that we will not have the history of all of those sensors, okay? And to finalize, microplastics, the scientific committee has been investigating that. They have been finding some spectral shapes on the reflectance, the amount of water, the light that comes of the water, and there are some signatures. But of course, it depends on the concentration, okay? For heavy metals, it's quite hard because most heavy metals, they are attached to the inorganic material, right? Right, yeah. So you can get a proxy, organic, inorganic, but not the heavy metals, right? So I have a student monitoring the plume of a river in a bay in Rio de Janeiro. They call it Sepetiba Bay, which, I mean, people have been doing a lot of experiments showing that the amount of heavy metals has increased because of the, I mean, several things. There's supplementary reactions there, there are minery around it, so it has been increased. But we don't have an algorithm that you can look at the spectral signatures and come up with but it's a growing area, yeah, and of course, yeah, exactly, and it's of course it's a technological area, and those hyperspectral sensors they are on orbital, but on drones, there are a bunch of drones now that you can attach hyperspectral sensors and look at the water quality with drones, or other types of, I mean, airplanes, etc. All of that's about costs now. How does it cost? Okay. Okay.
Thank you all. So only to end and to close our section, I'd like to congratulate all the presenters for the interesting presentations and for the work, the research and everything. It was very nice to think about the future of planning and designing, monitoring the water in our cities using technology as well. And also, I'd like to say maybe putting all this works together would be nice to think about planning and dealing with the water in a holistic way. So I think was very nice, this section. So I'd like to end the section and say good evening, good night, have a good rest. Thank you very much for the audience. Tomorrow, 7:45 here, 7:45, all right? So the visits. Where do you meet? In the front?
Yeah, in the Itambé,
Itambé,